And we are live. All right, everyone, welcome to another episode of Growth with Tacos. Joining us today are special guests, John Franco. I totally forget your last name. I'm sorry.
It's so long, man. I forget my last names. Franco Fernandez Ruiz.
Hey. Perfect. And my dear actual hometown friend, Bryson Alejandro, it is absolutely great to see you again too, man. And of course, there's also the usual John Marco and Rob Chen. So that is our cast today. So I invited John Franco and Bryson here because you two are also fellow creatives, and you are creating a new short film called SABORRRR. And I understand it's a dark comedy. Tell us about it.
Yeah, thanks for asking. But it's a lot of things. It's not just a dark comedy. That's one of our many affectionate nicknames for it. But it's certainly dark comedy. It's satire, and it's weird. And the film kind of came to the surface as we were trying to make something that felt like a representation of what it is to be Latinx. And so it's culture vulturism at its finest. We look at the advertising industry and we consider all of the exploitation that kind of happens there. I mean, we can get really into that, right? We can talk about Aunt Jemima. We can talk about Land O'Lakes. They're doing all they can right now to remove all of those faces off those brands. But the exploitation, it's already happened. So we're playing off of that. I mean, very tongue-in-cheek, very sarcastic and sardonic, really more because it's so dark. But it plays off of those ideas.
Nice. Okay, so I guess if I had to force it into a box, would you describe it more as a comedy, or would you describe it more as a social awareness piece?
It's a rom-com.
Oh, really?
No.
I love rom-coms, all right? Like, I'm afraid to say it.
Don't even be ashamed of it, man.
But, you know, if you saying it, I ain't going to tell you a liar.
It's a rom-com between, a Latinx person and their Latinx truth. No, it's a horror satire. It's comedy. That's really what it is. It's hard to kind of this pigeonhole into any one of those three categories. It's all of them, and it's still narrative. And I think that even in and of itself plays onto the themes, which is don't pigeonhole me, playa. Don't tell me what I am.
Perfect. So, that was the answer I wanted to hear. Go ahead, Rob.
So I have a question. So for everybody who's watching this and they're saying, okay, well, I get it. Okay, so it's going to be a comedy, but maybe dark comedy, talking about Latinx culture. What would you say would be the brief synopsis of the short film for those who want to know?
Great question. Basically, we've got our protagonist, Tony, who is of Puerto Rican descent, who is getting her dream job, and which is acting. And for any of us that have ever been on any set or have ever wanted to act,
I feel that
being on your first set is a big deal. And what she realizes the longer she's there is that she's selling something that she doesn't know she should be selling. And all of a sudden we hit some Twilight Zone-esque daymare experiences.
I love that.
No,
I love that.
I think that's really fertile ground for a story, personally. Go ahead, Rob. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
So this is a short film. Are you guys just producing it on your own, or do you guys have a crowdfunding campaign, or what is the current status for you guys right now?
Yeah, Bryson's our producer, so I'll let him speak to that a little bit. But Bryson?
Yeah. So we are independent filmmakers, and we're out funding right now to raise funds to be able to produce it well, to hire on an 80% BIPOC crew, and to pay for our actors, crew members, equipment. And so we have a Kickstarter campaign right now that's been going really well. We actually we funded our goal within the first 20 hours of the campaign, which is like
12.
Yeah. Oh, 12 hours? Dang, that's amazing.
Yeah, and we were just floored. Like we were shocked with the immense support that like people were just just showing us, and we were super grateful and humbled for the immense support that we've gotten, and we've I mean we keep getting more new pledges and contributions, and so we're excited. I think it's something that like people are excited about. It resonates with people. I think we're in our nation's in a state where like we're more open minded. I think because
Right.
of the things that have happened, whether for better or worse. Um, and yeah, so I think it's a rich story that people are hungry for, and they want to see our like people of color's life through a different lens, through our lens, through our voice. And so it's been really cool. So yeah, so long way to answer. Yes, we're self-producing, we're crowdfunding, and so yeah, if anyone's interested in learning more, like please check us out on Kickstarter. It's called SABORRRR, and yeah, it dives into a lot of really cool stuff.
All right.
So we're excited.
I just punched out the link in the chat to the Kickstarter for
Exactly.
anybody that wants to contribute. So I feel like I have an idea of the general background that creates the fertile grounds for the story, but how did this story actually come to be? Did it like take from any of your personal experiences? Gianfranco, you're the writer of it, correct?
I am. I'm one of the writers. There are two writers on it, but I am one of the writers.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Did it take from any of your personal experiences, or did you just like you met with someone else and you decided, what would be really cool and like tell a compelling story? Like how did this come to be?
Man, it was cumbersome. But yeah, we started. Bryce and I have a mutual friend in common, and that was redundant. But we have this friend, and she sat down and kind of spoke to me about this project that she wanted to make, and I kind of built out like the first version of it, in terms of scaling. I'm like, okay, this is what it could look like. So we ran it. We had Bryson on. We were like, okay, conceptually, well, how do we feel? And it felt like the story was too grand a story to tell in 5 minutes or 7 minutes.
Okay.
And so the more we like played with the ideas, the more myself and Zach, who's the other writer, kept getting like swept by other things. Right, we go like, man, black and white's really cool. Man, like Twilight, we really like Twilight. Basically, we like got hit by like a lot of fancy, and the reality that it takes a lot of work to break into the film industry or the ad, whatever it is, being a person of color. I mean, being a person in general, but being a person of color, you're going up a hill. It's not an easy battle to kind of like get there. And for lack of a better phrase here, you've got to know the right people. If you don't, what happens? So Bryson and I, we've been feeling like this is the Bernie Sanders of film projects. We've just been trusting the people. We've just been going like, here it is. This is the dish. Let's play this up as much as we can in terms of comedy, playing with horror, and utilizing what we're inspired by, especially in an industry that we haven't been able to exactly figure out, right? And really play into that, right? Like the fear and frustration of not being able to just so easily walk in and go, I deserve a seat here.
What do you feel like? So you're talking about the industry, right? And as a person of color and an artist of color, how difficult it is to get a footing in there. Have you found that because of the pandemic or just in the recent years, what have you noticed has been the biggest change in terms of the entire entertainment industry? And how can independent artists utilize, today, in order to really capitalize and build momentum and empower ourselves as artists?
That's a great question. Bryson, you want to go first?
Bryson. He's frozen.
I think his camera froze on a perfect shot of him.
Yeah, it's this whole time I'm like really reflecting.
He looks so ponderous.
Yeah.
I'm sure he's receiving some of our audio, but we seem to have some technical difficulties, unfortunately.
That's okay. I can answer for sure. Just want to give him a shot. I think that, you know,
Can you hear
right
me now?
It
Is my
is.
voice coming through?
Oh,
there it is. If
Oh.
Maybe.
Kind of.
it was almost there. Well, you know, I think that when it comes to the cinematic landscape, the narrative world right now, what's been really cool to kind of like watch is how we've gone essentially from not having any representation, or I should say, the representation being like so specific, right? You're black, you're a gangster, you're a rapper, you sell drugs. Oh, you're Mexican, even if you're not Mexican, you eat enchiladas. You are a part of a drug cartel, or your family is. You are across the border, and we always have to talk about immigration. That's like the constant idea. Like
Yeah.
if you're Asian, you know, you run some kind of a storefront. You know, you're constantly getting people out because you're not as nice. I mean, you're very smart and know math.
And you have no lines in the entire movie.
Exactly. Right. So, in all of these aspects, that's kind of been like the building. That's been the scaffolding of the narrative world up until like, I don't know, the mid 2015, around there. We started seeing this really large shift, and of course, there's been like, you know, the outlier. You know, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air was widely you know, watched and acclaimed. But we're starting to see these stories kind of surface, and that's really cool. And there are places like Netflix that are pushing for that, which is also really cool. The problem that I'm seeing, though, is regardless of the fact that we're getting more screen time, we're still getting relegated to these roles and positions of, you know, maybe with like a broader scale, but we're still there. We're still, you know, having like a taco shop and dealing with gentrification, which are true aspects of like our, you know, what we deal with in, you know, in an urban environment. But not every story needs to be that. Right?
Yeah, we're not limited to just that one idea of what Hollywood presents to us.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and that's a tough thing to kind of convince the big dollars of. Right? I mean, you see Chris Nolan, he just did that with John David Washington, and like the most literal of senses, he makes Tenet, this big, brainy action summer blockbuster, and he puts John David Washington in it, which is Denzel Washington's son. If you guys know that, and he's his name, we don't know it, so he's literally, his name in the film is actually the protagonist. That's what we call him all film long. We just say he's the protagonist, and we kind of look at that movie and go, all right, if Chris Nolan can do that, we can certainly start shifting more and more to black stories that have nothing to do with, you know, imprisonment, which is a reality in our lives, but it doesn't have to be that, and it doesn't have to be about, you know, gentrification or drugs or healers or rap. It can be about anything, right? Travel. It can be about love and romance, and it can certainly be about, you know, my man T'Challa in Wakanda, and it can make a ton of money.
Definitely.
I would like to add too. Hopefully, I'm coming in clearly now.
Yeah, perfect, man.
I'd like to add that that's like a huge thing for me, right? Like, not only do I want an increase of representation, but I just want like an increase of like our stories being told, and not even necessarily through our lens. Like, that's the preference, but like if there's going to be like a lot of, you know, white decision makers who are, that's the majority of decision makers in not only film but like across all industries mostly. It's like if that's the case, and if we're not going to be able to bring in more BIPOC decision makers quickly, then what can happen is they can start like casting or like giving us a voice by just representing us across the board. And like Gianfranco said, like it doesn't have to like be about like our culture or like, you know, like a Latino or Latina, you know, like it doesn't have to be about them like crossing the border or anything like that. Like how many American Latinx people are there that were born and raised here, that live normal lives and have like normal stories? Like, why can't we just see that, you know, like it doesn't have to be tied to the culture. And like I mean,
I didn't mean to interrupt you mid-sentence. That's some delay. But you know Michael Pena? He's an actor in like Marvel, Ant-Man, and a bunch of other movies. Yeah, like off the top of my head, he's the only like obviously Latin American you know, actor that I've seen get roles that will actually have nothing to do with his skin color or his heritage. And this is obviously a guy that, you know, is fluent in Spanish, and, you know, he didn't get the color of his skin from the sun, right? You know, like, you know, that he is someone of that background, but I've still seen him in movie roles where nothing to do with the skin color. And he's one of my favorite actors. Like every movie I've seen him in, he like nails that role, whatever it is, whether it's serious or it's a comedy, you know, he absolutely nails it. And it wasn't until I saw, I think, probably 2 films of his back to back that had nothing to do with his heritage or his race. I thought, like, wait a second, why don't I see this more often? You know, because again, he crushes it. And these days, like, I don't mean to say like good actors are a dime a dozen, but like you don't need to be looking for a specific race to get a good actor. Right. Just fundamentally, if race is not important to the role, then you literally have good actors of any race that you could choose from.
Yes.
At least I think so. I'm not an actor, but like that's what I think, right? So I agree with you, especially like in larger, more like prominent positions. It's kind of a wonder why we don't see this. In the past, you know, we've seen more African Americans get into these roles, like Will Smith in I Am Legend, for example. You know, nothing again to do with the fact that he's black, and he crushed that movie, right? But still, like these are more the exception, not the norm.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And I have mixed feelings personally on like whether we automatically should achieve for like a racial balance by proportion. Like I just want a good story as a consumer. Like, you know, that's what I want, right? I just want a good story, but I can't ignore as well going like, but wait a second, there's a large disconnect for these things that don't have anything related to the race in regards to the representation.
Yes. And I agree. Like on one side, we have the issue where the representation of minorities in movies are usually stereotyped in particular ways, depending on where they're from. And it's not really representative of various people's everyday social circles here in America within itself.
Definitely.
And I think that's one of the things you guys are just trying to tackle and make sense of, because the Western Hollywood, you know, market is the biggest media market in the world, and if we're not be able to properly represent what everyday life is like in these movies made in America, set in America, etc., then, you know, it's just a giant disservice as to how we are, and our only perception is like what Hollywood has been giving us. Like we have, you know, my biggest gripe is when they shoot scenes in Mexico and it's like tinted yellow, and I'm like, all right, guys, I've been there. It's nothing. The sky is blue, just as like, you know, 10 miles north in the border, right?
For real. I had a very similar experience with that, where the first audition that I ever got in 2021. So for this year, I had this audition. It's for I can't say the name of the film. I don't want to, you know, say anything bad about them, but I had to play this role, and it was like a supporting role. It was for a feature film, and I was like, oh wow, it's gonna be so exciting. And I read the script, and I was like, damn, just another foreign Asian dude who has 3 lines, and he gets bashed by his roommates once again. And I remember getting so mad at that, because I was like, I'm so done with this. And I sent this long email to my manager saying, hey, like, I really hope they don't fuck this movie up. I really hope they don't fuck this character up, because it's a period piece. So any person of color that's in a period piece, for me, I'm like, this is incredible and has a lot of opportunities, because that's an opportunity for people of color to be a part of American history in ways that hasn't been done before. So I said, I really hope they don't mess this up, but I feel really scared about this. And she sends an email back to me and says, unless the people do it themselves, unless the black community that the indigenous community, people of color, immigrants, Hispanic, Asian. Unless we do it ourselves, Hollywood is not going to offer that just freely for us. We have to be the ones to create, which is why I'm always inspired to see independent filmmakers take that reign and say, you know what? I know that they don't have any opportunities out here. I'm going to make this film on my own, and I'm going to fund it. I'm going to crowdfund it with the resources that we have. So I just want to say, from one artist to another, like, it's super inspiring to see what you guys are doing. And I really hope that anybody who's watching is able to take a look at their Kickstarter, to check out the project. And if you guys can, make sure to donate as well. Just want to throw that out there.
Also, just as a kind of quick aside, okay, not that I'm trying to sidebar too much, but this is a movement more than anything. So I love the idea of donation, but really it's contribution, it's pledge, it's becoming a part of it. This is oh my gosh, Bryson is upset. He left. I'll be back. Just kidding. But that's the idea, right? It's you come and pledge and come and be a part of our story and contribute, right? And that means that it's not just mine, it's not just Bryson's or our other partner and those that are involved on set. It's literally every backer that's come in is part of this story in some way, shape, or form. And we in our team for SABORRRR, we don't just care about good stories. We like good stories. We care about representation in those good stories. If I only cared about good stories, I'd put another film out there with a white cast. But I'm not doing that. Bryson's not doing that. Zach's not doing that. Kelsey's not doing that because we don't believe that that is the only way to make a film, and that is not the representation of America. So, you know, holla at your boy, holla at Bryson. You know, we out here trying to make it happen.
Hey,
and we're doing a great job. We're at 19K, and we're feeling like blown away by everybody. We're trying to make that 25K happen, and if we can, we might be able to make some other really cool things happen that we can't talk about too much right now.
Oh shoot!
I'm motivated and inspired by anybody's creative efforts, and I think that this is a particularly cool one. I know Bryson from high school, and he's always been like a shining light in the room, really. So if he's behind this, I'm like, all right, this is probably something good, and even if it's maybe dark or critical or whatever, I'm sure there's like some uplifting spots about it, and as you said, there's a movement behind this, right? I'm interested at how you characterized it as though you don't want to tell a good story, because to me, like, this is part of telling a good story. Like, it seems to me like you viewed them as opposing ideas, when in me, like, this is just part of it. Am I like misunderstanding somehow?
Yeah. So sorry, I didn't say I don't want to tell a good story. I say I don't want to just tell a good story.
Okay.
To just tell a good story is to do it in any old-fashioned way. Find the best actors. Let's say we're in Utah, okay?
Right.
We could easily make a film with talent that is really good here in Utah. But the talent that's really good here in Utah is, as you'd probably guess, white, overwhelmingly so. Okay. We have pushed outside of that boundary. We've said this is a limitation that we refuse to go by to make a good film, to tell a good story. We are now going to the length of specifically finding talent that is much harder to find to tell this story. So we want to tell a good story, but we want to make sure that representation is included in that story. And if it costs us a year to make sure that we find the right people to be in that story so that we have the right level of representation, so that we can show the world what it actually looks like, that's what we're going to do, because that's what stories need to be now.
You want to do it right.
Yeah, that is telling a good story in my book. That's
absolutely.
That's telling the story also that you want to tell.
So it's not just telling a good story. Right. It's going above and beyond. It's telling a freaking phenomenal story.
Perfect. And you might not know this. I'll go real quick. It's relevant. Then I'll chime you in, Bryson. You might not know this about me, but I design games as a hobby, And the way that I've noticed that the games that people like the most are the games that I built because just I wanted to play it. Like the game didn't exist, so therefore I made the game so that I could play it. It was a game that I wanted to play, right? And those are the games that I'm not making it for other people. I'm making it literally for myself. I mean, to play with other people, but I'm the audience that I'm making this for, and they're the games that people enjoy the most. I've absolutely noticed like that best. When I make a game like, oh, I'm making this game for my nephew or whatever, like, okay, he thinks it's cool or whatever, but it's not nearly as well received as something I noticed. So I think there's a huge thing to be said for like telling the story that you want to tell, making the game that you want to make, right?
Seeing
I
the
think
movies
that's
that you want to see.
part. So anyway, go ahead, Bryson.
No, yeah, thank you. There really is like a level of proactivity when it comes to telling stories that are inclusive. So I mean, for my work, I act as well. So I'm an actor, but I also write and produce commercials. And I don't know of anyone else locally that is like as proactive as me in like casting BIPOC actors in their stuff just because. And because we're in Utah, the talent pool is much smaller, and so it is more difficult to find, good talented actors to fill certain roles and positions. But that doesn't mean that I should give up, right? Like that it's a challenge, it's an extra hurdle, but like it's worth it because what does it do? People will then see this commercial here or this commercial there about, a diaper bag or a credit union or whatever it is. And people see themselves. They're like, oh, wow, that's me. That's someone that looks like me. And there's a lot of production companies that like, they're pumping out commercials left and right. But like time and time again, I'm like, what is happening? Like, it's always a white spokesperson or it's always a white family. And like, surely not only white people like purchase shampoo, right? Like surely like people also like people of color grill outside, right? Like they eat burgers, right? And so I'm like, but why is it that like everything that I see produced is just like it's very white centric? And even, I mean, I was so bold as to like call some of them out like last summer. And then they're like, oh, don't worry, we have some great stuff in the works that like shows more diversity. But like I've seen a lot of the stuff that they've released since then, and I'm like, where's the diversity? And so yeah, I feel like people need to be proactive about it. They also need to be more aware. There's an awareness that needs to be there, that it's like, I mean, this product can be consumed by everyone. Everyone needs to buy things. And so like, let's start showing like multiracial families. If you don't want to get rid of all white people, let's have a multiracial family, like with some mixed kids. Or let's, like do something more proactive. And a lot of it starts from like the ideation or the writing and like being proactive, even in the writing, like, like a black man in his 30s is the spokesperson, like you can be as specific as that to then hopefully guarantee that a black man gets cast as the spokesperson, or, an Asian American woman or whoever it is. And so, yeah, I feel like people need to be proactive. They need to be aware. They need to be proactive, and they need to not be scared. Because I feel like there's some fear. It's like, oh, well, I'm playing it safe, right? Like this is the safe card. And it's like, hey, like I promise you, people will still laugh at your commercial. They will still buy your little Ziploc fancy bag thing for your toddler. They're still gonna buy it if it's a Middle Eastern mother, with her toddler. Like I promise you, it's not going to deter too many people. And if it does, you don't want their business anyways.
Yeah, children are still going to poop. They're going to buy diapers, all right?
That's universal. That's every human.
So if I can be the devil's advocate, I guess, here for a moment. So I feel like advertisements and movies or whatever, I feel like they're two different beasts. So commercials, their fundamental purpose is to influence you, preferably to influence you to buy their shit. right?
Mhm.
But first and foremost, like that's all they care about. They if they get you to laugh along the way, they only care about that so long as they got you to buy whatever crap they're pushing on you, right? It's a very I'm gonna say corporate objective, right? So psychology happens to work so that when people feel like they can imagine themselves in what they're seeing, which is a huge part of why diversity is important in film, right? But when they can imagine themselves in what they're seeing, they're much more likely to also actually like buy the item.
Mhm.
That's the actual psychology behind it. So if your largest demographic happens to be white, then from a business standpoint, it makes sense to have a white actor or actress in your Ziploc bags commercial or whatever, because white people make up 45% of Ziploc bag purchasers, and that just happens to be the largest, slice of the pie, even if it's not a majority. I'm making these numbers up. You get the idea. So what is the compelling business reason to go like, well, this should make more money, but yeah, I'm just gonna throw that away because I want to do that for whatever reason, I guess. Like, what is the compelling business reason for commercials?
I mean,
Yeah, go ahead, Rob. Yeah, you're up, man.
I mean, like, why not? You are able to tap into a whole new market. If you're thinking just business wise, as a producer, as if you are the CEO of Ziploc, and all you have tapped in so far is, say, the 45% of the demographic of white Americans, who's to say that, like, oh, you can't get even more revenue from the American community, from the Latinx community, from the Asian American community? There's a lot of these communities they're also self-sufficient too, and there's a lot of capital in them and a lot of untapped resources. So if anything, it's even better for your business if you were to cast like a diverse range of different actors for different parts. And there's some commercials that do it where they will have the same commercial, but then they'll cast different people, and they'll even have different languages too for that same commercial or that same PSA ad. We have it all the time here in New York. Say, for example, for the vaccines, they will have it in multiple languages. They will have it in with all different types of people because they want to have the maximum reach,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't want to leave anybody out. Like, why would you, as a business person, why don't you want to make extra money?
Yeah, and not to go
That's
off
how it is.
topic too much, but I'm sure there are cases where they will be shooting the same commercial for different demographics, and as technology gets better, as targeted ads gets better, internet service providers are going to know, like, hey, this person's a Peruvian minority, let's give them this particular ad that's more relatable to this person. But yeah, I'm sure that's already happening already in some regard.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I love both of those answers, Rob, because I think you're absolutely right. Maybe 45% of people buying it are white people because you only have white people in the ads. Maybe more, people of other whatever would buy it more if you had them in the ads as well, right?
For sure. I mean, if you
I
had
think that's a
I was just gonna say that if you combine like every minority and marginalized group, it's pretty a lot. It's kind of a lot. It doesn't
Oh, yeah.
become a minority anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think like I could be wrong on this. I think Caucasian people are expected to be the minority in the United States of America by like 2025.
Sometime in the near
Minority,
future.
less than 50% or something.
Sometime in our generation.
Yeah. Don't quote me on that number.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's so soon.
But,
It's
like
2021
it's
right now.
soon. Like really, really, really soon.
Damn, bro, that's like being a freshman in college, and then by the time you graduate, you're like, oh wow, like I'm the majority now.
Yeah, and to add to Rob's point, like, you want to increase your market share because just by nature, having a bigger market share in some ways exponentially increases your marketability of the product. Because if you're like, only 5% of households have your product, not many people naturally know about it through their points of connection. But if you get to 10%, 20%, like the amount of like tying into the whole 6 degrees of separation, you're going to know someone that has like an iPhone regardless, or etc. And I think Apple does a pretty good job of just for the most part, including a very diverse cast of people when they do their, product placements and commercials, etc.
I would also say that it's also great because here things are becoming more globalized. So we can't only, for a commercial, you might not even only be looking at the American market. You might be looking at, China. You might be looking in Brazil. You might be looking in Switzerland. Depends on where you are. So that already, by opening your world up to more than just what America has, now you're, oh wow, there's a lot of different colors here. Maybe if I tailor it in some type of way, I might even get a new market in a completely different country where this concept doesn't even exist.
Right.
And that
Yeah.
makes your business that much more strong.
Yeah, and looping back to Gianfranco and Bryce, what would you say are more? I would say I would more particularly interested in recent films, as maybe older ones as well, that have accomplished what you guys are trying to accomplish with SABORRRR. Like you guys gave like the Fresh Prince as an example of a medium being able to do that. Has anything come out recently that catches your eye that is along the same vein of what you're trying to accomplish?
Good question.
Yeah. I'm not gonna table that. I'm gonna bubble it for like 2 seconds.
Sure.
Just hopping back to that last question. By the way, you guys killed it. I love all those answers. Those answers were really dope. I've got to say, as much as I love logic, which I consider myself, as logical as they come, I think that speaking more absolutely, if there's an organization out there that only wants to cast white folks because they have 45% of white people that, or maybe more than that come in and buy their stuff, they are a thing of the past and we want them gone. That's what I think about that. We're not trying to get rid of white people. Sometimes people get crazy political about this kind of stuff. Like, this is erasure. This is erasure. No, I just think that something like Spider-Man Homecoming, right, for example, has a diversity in it that allows us to go, oh, awesome. It's not just a cast of white people. This actually shows what the world looks like. I mean, look at this podcast right now. Bryson and I could have very well been on something that had like an all-white crew, but this is a very diverse kind of group of people, and this is what the world looks like today, especially in the States. So let's not, if there's an organization out there that's just trying to cast white people, you lost my money.
Yeah, and not to interject, we'll go back to my question, but you brought up a good point with Marvel. Like, when you think about it, I think the films that do it well and the TV shows that do it well do it in a way that isn't forced and aren't trying to do it. Like, I didn't think about the multiracial cast of Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And when it comes to specific examples, I personally feel the Woman of Marvel scene in Endgame felt a bit forced, but the way the Mandalorian, I don't want to spoil anything, but there's a scene in the Mandalorian where they're bringing to a prison ship, and you don't think about the fact that it's an all-female badass crew just kicking ass because it's executed so seamlessly in my opinion. Like, there's doing it and there's also executing it very well.
Yeah, I guess like in a way, it's like how my teachers always say it. It's like you are enough. You existing. You just being on the stage, you just being on the screen is enough. You don't have to get any extra like little immigrant little bits or any little cultural little tweaks or something like that. You just being there is cool. And that's very powerful.
Yeah, it's just exemplifying that you're as an everyday person as much as everyone else.
You're human. Yes. But yes, I am curious about that question, Gianmarco, as well.
Yeah, I think Spider-Man Homecoming was a good example. What other, just to circle back, in terms of bubbling the question, what other contemporary examples would you say are good films that accomplish what you guys are trying to do?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, like I said, on a multicultural level, Spider-Man's going to speak to that. But on a thematic level, this is like the Latinx Get Out, So a short version, right? There's a short film. But we are playing on themes that we find in Get Out very, frequently throughout the film, and we're pulling those threads into the narrative of SABORRRR, and playing that, a little more cheeky, obviously, than even, was being done by my man Jordan. So that's one film that I think kind of speaks to it. What we're doing. Another one that inspires us is, and it's not a film, it's a television series, but The Twilight Zone, we like the freaky.
Also by Jordan Peele.
Yeah. I mean, we're talking the old school version though. But
the old school version.
Yeah. The original, the OG. We like that black and white. I mean, those episodes, that series was revolutionary for what it was able to kind of bring to the forefront in terms of conversation and dialogue in a really freaky way. And that's kind of the aim. And Jordan, you're right, Jordan Peele came in and he did that, and he did it on a multicultural level. So we can even look at that today version of Twilight Zone and bringing that in and kind of playing with expectation and what happens in our minds, because that's where all the horror is, right? And horror is really just trauma, right? Realized. So we're playing on those kinds of realms of existence, of going like, why is this scary on both sides of the equation?
Definitely. Word.
For me personally, some recent films that like made an impact, like I just instantly fell in love, and I'm like, this is what I need more of. Which I think our film will help kind of accomplish a little bit of as well, is Searching is one. It's a little less known, but it's right. It's beautiful, and it's like
so
it's
good.
literally
I love that film.
Searching, and I'll talk about the other one in a sec. But like that is like it's like a psychological thriller, right? Like it's a crime thriller. This father, it's a story about a father whose daughter goes missing, and it's like it's a story that we've seen before, I suppose, like through a different lens. Like they had the very creative approach and an execution to it that makes it much more of a phenomenal film. But like the story of like a parent losing their child by abduction, like we've seen that story before by a lot of, you know, white families, and white families lose their kids all the time, whatever. But it's this story where it's like it's an Asian American father and he loses his daughter. And like there was no reason for it to be an Asian American father losing his Asian daughter, but like it was. And that story with that casting choice made it that much more interesting. It made it that much more like engaging. It like spiced it up. And it was like, wow. But also it like had very little to do with like the Asian culture, right? Like it was just a story about a father trying to find his daughter. And it's beautiful and phenomenal. And so if you haven't seen it, you got to check it out. Another movie that made a huge impact on me was Yesterday.
That's the Indian the guy from the UK. He's trying to be Bruce Springsteen, right?
Yeah. His name is Himish Patel, and it that also, I was like, what an interesting casting choice, because it very easily could have been a white male protagonist, but for whatever reason they chose to cast a Indian British man, a British Indian. I don't know what the combination is, but but yeah, and I'm like, and it was just like a normal story. It had nothing to do with his culture again, but like here is this brown man as the protagonist of this film, and it was like, wow, how beautiful, how amazing. And just like, and it was a cool story. It was like unique and creative and different. And then like he's also like singing, and like he it's like touches on a lot of like Beatles song. Like the Beatles has a huge influence on the movie. And it's like, this is what we need more of. We just need more normal stories. And yes, they can be super creative and different approaches and stuff, but like with people of color. And I think that the push that I have for more stories with BIPOC people is that the more we see them on screen, the more we experience their stories, their hardships, their trials, their tribulations, their joy. The more we experience that, the more we'll fall in love with those characters, the more we'll fall in love with those people, and the more empathy we will have for them in real life.
Dude, you just gave me goosebumps, man. That was beautiful. Oh, love, empathy, yes.
I'm glad you're here, Bryson.
That was dope.
So yeah, so I love it. I mean, and I'm glad that we're starting to see more of it, but
yeah,
I hope that we like the push continues forward, and I hope we get to a place where it's not a struggle, where it's not an amazing thing to like see a person of color on, as you know, on a poster, a movie poster, or like leading a film, or a woman of color like winning the Oscar like three years in a row. Like hopefully that's not like an abnormal new thing.
Mhm.
You know, a few years down the road, hopefully we can like normalize it, and it's like awesome, yes, beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's just make it as normal as everyday life.
Mhm. I think art has that potential to do that more than many other types of industries where you show it, people look at it, and then wow, you could feel some type of way. Whereas not just okay, their race, their color, their background, their gender, their sexuality. Now it's like, oh wow, I feel them as a human being. And I could imagine them as my friend, as my colleague, as a family member. And ultimately I think that will the idea is that it will bring more unity from different groups of backgrounds.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's worth noting that not everyone is from I'll say a multicultural environment.
True.
So for people that aren't, then this is often their exposure that they have, you know,
Mhm.
and you say a Hollywood video or a movie, I should have said, or what have you, that is the representation that they're experiencing, you know,
Mhm.
whether you're coming from a small, Fort Dodge in Iowa, or whether you're coming from Busan in Korea, actually. Like I can speak to Korea quite a bit.
Mhm.
There is I noticed a much stronger anti-black sentiment in Korea than I had expected.
Mm.
And it was really surprising to me because I was like, but wait a second, like basically you don't have any black people, so why do you dislike them? Like you basically never met a black person in your life. Why do
Mhm.
you dislike black people? Like this doesn't make sense to me. But it's because of what their exposure is
Yep.
to it, right?
Mhm.
So because their exposure to black people happens to be primarily gangsta rap, where the lyrics are not exactly favorable to respect building between people, I would say, then like that's their impression that they now lump all black people in, right? And then that's fundamentally a problem.
Yeah, yeah.
you know
That
and
that comes to America though. That comes
right,
down to the
exactly,
mainstream, the decision makers, you
right.
know?
And like Korea is a more like pointed example because Korea is incredibly homogenous. The entire country
Mhm.
is like 99% Korean.
Mhm.
And like there's very, very, very few places in the United States of America that are that homogenous, but they do exist. And even if they're not to that degree, like again, this could be the representation and the exposure that you give them. So I really do wish that we saw, like in particular in more movies, with just like, hey, where race isn't important and just that person's not a white dude. Like I
Mhm.
really do wish we saw that more often. Because
Yeah.
oftentimes, like, just they're part of very compelling stories, and I do feel that the United States in particular, so we've got Hollywood, so we have this responsibility. We're
Yeah.
one of the most diverse nations, or possibly the most diverse nation in the world. Like, let's celebrate that shit,
Yes. Yes.
um, my own personal observation, by the way, I mentioned commercials, like, but why bother, right? That was just the devil's advocate. I have noticed like a skyrocket ship, the amount of diversity that I'm seeing in commercials lately.
Mhm.
Personally, I don't know if you guys are also seeing that or whatever. But at this point, I remember I was playing board games at a friend's house, and The Bachelor or The Bachelorette was on or whatever. Um, and I sat through an entire commercial break, and I remember like thinking, "Wow, it has been several years since I just actually saw commercials on TV because I don't really even watch TV that much these days." And I remember thinking, for an entire commercial break, I didn't see a single white person in a commercial.
Mm.
Now that could have just been like a fluke or whatever,
Mhm.
that was going on. But I remember thinking the thought, I was like, wow, this would have never happened 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know if like we're where we should be, where we're at. Like without a doubt, there's still like racism and stereotyping. Like I can't deny any of that. But I think it is cool to note like we're certainly on an upwards swing.
Mhm.
And I guess just picking your guys' brain, do you think like it? Do you think we're at a good level in regards to commercials? Do you think that there's not enough still? I'll tell you, I don't really see Asian dudes in commercials these still though. I see Middle Easterners more than I see Asian dudes. No, I'm serious.
We on the come up. We on the come up, brother.
Yeah,
We in
I'm
here.
rooting for you, my man. Honestly.
I'm still hitting. I'm trying my best, man.
Yeah.
It's a hard
So,
not
I don't
life, but we out here.
Open question. I'm done talking. Just figured I'd spitball some observations and questions.
Yeah, I think we've not. Here's the thing: anything that's like trendy, which I've noticed, kind of there has been a lot more diversity even in commercials and even in films, and I've been getting more calls, right? Too, right? So these things are positive in a way.
Congratulations, by the way.
Hey, thank you. But the reality of the situation, though, is just because this good thing is happening doesn't mean that the good thing is happening. Okay. And I mean, we can kind of like dance around history with the topic like this. I don't want to like take crazy broad swings, but here's one. If we go all the way back to slave times, okay, there was a northeastern rhetoric versus a southern rhetoric, okay, and what had started to gain traction, politicized as a popularity, and I wouldn't even say politicized. There was a movement occurring in the Northeast that led to the liberation of slaves. But that liberation wasn't happening across the United States. It was happening in this one region. Okay. So all of a sudden, there was more freedom in the Northeast when it came to Black folks than there was anywhere else in the entire country. And that kind of perpetuated even through the actual liberation of slaves. So after everything was all said and done, there were still lynchings occurring. Okay. So all this is to say, I mean, and this was passing on all the way until we get to that young man who whistled at a beautiful white woman. Only to film. That's right. I was coming to it, but yeah, our boy came, whistled at a white woman, and we found out like 5 years ago that she is, for all intents and purposes, a lying-ass liar. She said that he whistled at her, and he did not whistle at her, and he was beat to death. To death. Okay? So this kind of idea, though really removed from us, I mean, barely in a sense, but removed from us in many ways, kind of shows like what trends do. And they start as kind of like this thing that happens, like, oh yeah, I heard the Northeast, they've got this going on. And slowly, finally we get to liberation. And then there's still somehow this like bias that's, like a virus, a disease that's not really getting to the core of the problem. And the pendulum will swing back. We can go to a place where like these changes are momentary, that they're just a trend and that's it. And that's why people like me right now, like in 20, 30 minutes ago, or maybe even less, I have no idea how long we've been on. But when I said, hey, we can talk about all of the capitalistic ideals of an organization and going, what's the marketability of this race or that race in our commercial? If somebody's having that conversation, get out. We don't need you around anymore. Okay? We're over that. We're not going to be swinging the pendulum back in a direction that is archaic. We're done. We need to continue paving the path forward. And forward looks like this panel of people right now. Right? That's what it looks like.
Definitely. I feel that 100%. Whereas like you're talking about the pendulum swing back and forth. As an Asian American, I thought that I had some representation with Crazy Rich Asians coming out, Searching, and like the farewell. Oh my God, Awkwafina won a Golden Globe and all that stuff, and now we've got Minari and Steven Yeun's got nominated for an Oscar. Oh my God, first Asian American. and yet today I just see.
Oh my gosh.
That shooting that happened in Atlanta. And I'm like, that's that pendulum swing. I was like, okay, I guess we were hot for a hot second, but now I'm reminded of the other side of the pendulum. So it's exactly what you're saying, is that we have to just keep pushing. We have to keep pushing we have to strive to be better, and not just settle for trends and just what the money has to offer, because that's not going to get us anywhere. So I hope that, what do you feel like for as artists that we can do right now to help push for that type of change?
I'm gonna just hop right in right now because I
Just keep
it's like
started.
hot fire about this. Decay is something that hides like in plain sight, but you don't see it because it's covered by like the most, just the smallest things, and you would never think there's some decay behind that, and there is. And the only thing that I can say, as I've learned, as I've been coming up, as I've even learned to identify myself more and more with my heritage and my culture, is that from any perspective, right, we need to be able to, when entering a conversation, eliminate the power play and the privilege that we come into the conversation with. So in a conversation where I may be having a discussion with somebody who is, let's say, gay, okay? I am not gay, all right? Just because I am not gay does not mean that I should enter a conversation and go, well, why can't you like women? Or why can't you like men?
Mm-hmm.
Whichever the direction is. I have to be able to place myself on the side of the oppressed, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in these situations when we're having these conversations, I mean, like whenever we talked about the advertising industry and going, I wish we could stop talking about like if a person is black or if a person is blue or if a person is white, like that shouldn't even be a thing. I think that culturally that shouldn't be a thing, especially if they're black or they're blue. But if they're white, we have to eliminate that. Why? Because that's where the privilege starts. So we can't even bring it up. We can't even talk about there being like the white part there, right? Because if we are, and we look at all five of us here, we're all men. We're at the top of the food chain just because we're men. Pierce, if we talk about you, you're at the very, very, very top of the food chain because you're a man and you're white. That's how it works here in America and in the world. Those are power dynamics. Remove them so that we can talk about oppression and what that means. Otherwise, we cannot have a proper dialogue about it, right? Now, I don't know about anybody's sexual orientation. I'm not asking. I hope that it's a beautiful and fruitful, diverse group of individuals here, even on that front. But Pierce, if you happen to be heterosexual, you're on the very top of the food chain because you're white, you're male, and you're heterosexual, which means it's okay for you to talk about just about anything. And if we add one more thing to that, if you are American, which you are, you'd be at the very, 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 very top of the food chain. And that is what CEOs, most of them, right, in the United States are, right? And this is not to like isolate you by any stretch of the imagination. You're having the conversation. That
I don't feel personally.
Good. I'm glad. Good.
I'll speak when you're making your point, which so far is very eloquently worded. So please continue.
Yeah. I think that once we're able to categorize this as a reality, to remove the privilege part of privilege versus oppression and kind of walk on over to the oppression side, that's when we start to see things from a different perspective. And I love to think of, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's Aristotle who said this, but the mark of an educated man is to take an idea that's not yours, right? And I don't mean like just steal an idea, but to look at something that is not my perspective, that is not my slice of life, that is not the way that I consider the world or perceive it, and be able to look at it in the way that someone else does, That is the mark of a truly educated man. And then go, this is mine. And I don't look at it from my perspective. I only look at it from that other perspective. That's true intelligence right there. And to do that on a broad scale and grab a bunch of different ideas and then have a conversation within yourself about those things, and not about what's right and what's wrong, not coming at it from a privileged power, but looking at it from the oppressed. That's when you'll be able to speak for those people that don't have power. And there's still a ton in this world. And I don't just mean on a racial level, right? The LGBTQIA, for example, the obviously BIPOC, we've been talking about a lot here. The intersectionalities of identities, that's another one that's happening. You know, the only way we're ever going to get to a place where people feel like they belong and we can drop these guards and barriers is to be able to jump to the side of the oppressed.
Yeah. So, thank you for speaking, man. I actually fully expected we'd like hit this topic at some point. I know being the only white guy even on this podcast right now, you know, is bound to happen. And I suppose Bryson could you're totally white passing if you chose to be. Correct me if I'm wrong. Would you like agree with that statement these days?
I would hope not to agree with it. I mean, but I mean, it's interesting that you mention it because pre-mustache and like pre like long hair, yeah. I mean, I could be white passing. I am half white, and my name, like my given name, is like very white. And so like, but growing up, it's interesting because like with my identity, I was raised in a very white community, and when people like assumed I was white, I like got offended, and I was just like, but I'm not. Like, I mean, I am a little bit like half, but I'm brown, you know? And I'm like, I for so long, for my entire life, I've yearned and wished that I was browner, that like people could see me and like they would know that like, oh, he's brown. And I want that. Like I want that so much. And so I wonder if like subconsciously that's why I've like had my mustache for like 8 years now, because it spices me up. It's a little bit more exotic.
Mustache, dude.
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
It's a mean mustache. I love it.
Yeah. And so it's like interesting. And I don't know. I mean, talking to other like mixed people or like multiracial people, like I feel like they've also encountered like their identities, like they don't know where they fit. Or like my wife, she's half Mexican, but a lot of people think she's Asian because of just like her features. But like even then like she struggles because she's not accepted by like the white community, but she's also not accepted by her Latinx community because she doesn't look like them. And so it's like, where does she belong, right? And so for me, I'm like, oh man, yes, I can be white passing, and like I hope that helps me when I'm like auditioning for roles. It's like, hey, if you don't want a brown person, I can be white too, you know. But but like I've come to a place where it's like I want, like my stage name is Bryson Alejandro, and that's very specific. And my middle name is Alejandro. So but like it's very specific because I want to like push forward, like I am Latino, I am proud. Please cast me, not just for like, you know, the drug smuggler or the guy crossing the river or whatever, like not just for that, but like cast me like for everything, you know, like I want to show the world that like I am diverse. But at the same time, I also recognize that like because I am lighter skinned, I am white passing, that I am more likely to be cast in things than my darker brothers and sisters who are also Latinx. And like we see that in telenovelas, we see that in a lot of like I mean a lot of movies that have, you know, Latinx leads like Antonio Banderas or Salma Hayek, like they are lighter skinned. Where are the Latinx people that are darker skinned? I think Michael Pena, he's a darker skin tone, but like there's more like my mom is very dark skinned, and like, do I ever see any women on the screen that look like her? No. And so so I'm also very aware that like I am more likely to be cast than browner people just because of my lighter skin. And for some people, it's like, oh well, he's still Latino, so check, right? But like, I would hope, and I would gladly give a role to a browner version of me, or a browner man or woman, so that like that can be pushed forward, so that we can be exposed to the deeper and the richer and the more beautiful colors that are out there. So anyways, sorry, that was like a very long tangential train of thought
That
to
was
your,
more beautiful
your
than any
comment.
I could have, man. Honestly,
That was poetic, bro.
Thank you for speaking. And I love your mustache, love your hair, man. Like, yeah, I said white passing if you chose to be, and I meant it if you chose to be, because right now you're I think you're crushing exactly the look that you're going for.
No, thank you.
Yeah. So Gianfranco, you might not know this, but before I moved to Utah,
So I was about to be like, I was borderline hoping that you were gonna be like, you might not know this, but I'm Puerto Rican. Oh gosh.
Because all shapes and sizes, you know.
Yeah.
No,
Just completely
I don't-
flip every possibility threw at him.
So I do speak Spanish, and I have had one dude think I've had more than one person think I was Puerto Rican, but that's definitely the exception because I got freaking blue eyes. So that is not a normal leap that people have made with frequency. But I was gonna say before I moved to Utah, I grew up in a town in California that was and is 10% Caucasian. So I actually know very, very well what it's like to be the minority in the place that you're growing up. So anyway, with all the intersectionalities that you pointed out, that all of us have the hey, we're an American check. You know, absolutely. Just by the poorest Americans that still have a roof over their head are living better than more than half of the world, right? So like check without a doubt, you know, we have that advantage. And just by being born or by being alive in 2021, you know, it doesn't matter where you are in the world, by being alive in 2021, you are much more likely to be doing better than someone that was born and alive in 1600, right? Like these are statistical, like demographical, just like trends or facts or statements, right? What I hate about the intersectionalism idea though, is that it almost denies someone their individual experiences, you know? Like Bryson was just trying to relate how he really wished that he like looked more brown growing up or whatever, because that's part of his like identity. And like you're kind of feeling like, why am I being treated one way? Why are you assuming that I do or do not have certain experiences based on how you're perceiving my skin, right? And that probably just happened here in this conversation, right? You probably didn't know that I grew up in a 10% Caucasian town, right? You probably like were assuming like, hey, you know, this guy, as well-meaning and polite as he's hopefully been so far in this show, right? Like, you know, you probably assumed certain things in my background that now you maybe are changing or evolving your perception on, right? So I really agree that without a doubt, like, yes, by being a white, you are more likely to be benefited than being born, say, black or any other race in the United States of America, right? Check. I agree. All right. Historically, by being a male, you're more likely to be doing check. There's a lot of recency to say that, hey, maybe it's better to be female, but that is like within the last 20 years. Without like for the rest of mankind's history, it's better to be a man. And so like that's like without a doubt, like that's another check item there. You know, all the ones that you listed, yeah, these are absolute like demographical trends. But when we focus on these, I feel like it denies the individualism of any individual. You know, I hopefully that didn't sound redundant, because we do need to recognize, hey, as a whole, blank people have been disadvantaged. Like, I can't agree with that. We are still living today with the holdovers of slavery. Like, there's no way anybody can intelligently deny that, right? So, like, that's a huge, huge deal. But if we assume, hey, I see that you are black or whatever, I'm now going to assume that you didn't have a father or didn't have a good education or whatever. Like now we're going a little too far, is in my opinion, you know? And I think that level of like burying assumptions, I feel like it doesn't really, I feel like it could hurt more than it can help. I think it's incredibly important to try to imagine yourself in the shoes of other people. But when we start to focus on these big, broad patterns, you know, we really lose sight of what's important. And what's important is us, you know, not some statistic, you know, us. That's what's important.
I mean, I think that's why things like art is so important. It's kind of what we were echoing before, which is, hey, don't just look at me just for my. I mean, yes, I want to be proud of my race and my background, but you know, like, don't just cast me just based on this one role or just because of how I look like, and I'm just portraying this one type of character the whole time. And that's not just in film; that's also in media as well, like what the news decides to show. So having those diverse stories and making everything more human over time, we will start to see those individuals' experiences being highlighted more. If we just paint a broad picture and just a broad stroke of what one person is, then that is what, as you said before, especially if you're in a homogenous community, that's all you would know of that person. You know, so that's why like having these independent storytellers push forth these types of stories is important. It's part of that solution to answer that question of like, how do you get rid of that intersectionality of like, how do I still retain the individuality of my specific experience? Having more of these diverse stories where I am a human, then I can relate to anybody else.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And, you know, not that I want to echo, and I don't want to sit in an echo chamber either, but to go back to what I was saying earlier, if we're discussing those differences and how they look like as they blossom in the world, that's a very important thing. And obviously, you know, characterization starts to show after the fact, right? Like what does this person eat? What does this person buy? What does this person do for work? Those are the things that tell us a story, that paint a narrative that might elicit some kind of reaction or emotion that manipulates as we're watching to care for a person or to dislike a person. But to center the conversation back to this thing, if we are ever to really make it out, we have to consider privilege versus oppression. And the only way to do that is to be as collective as we can with information. Because if not, we're going to fall into certain behaviors that, again, the pendulum swinging back, like, you know, Pierce, for example.
I'll suggest, though, that if that's what we want to focus on, you missed the two most important ones. Whether you grew up with a functioning parental household or the income level of those parents. Those
are definitely important, but the top of the food chain is definitely not whether you have a parent or not. It is being white. That is the very top, and being a male that's white. And those are like the two biggest things. Patriarchy has essentially created the world as we see it. And the reason that men stand on the precipice or the promontory, so to speak, is because we decidedly commanded that those things be ours, and that we decidedly commanded, or, you know, white men decidedly commanded that they'd go on a ship and go to some random land and take it and just grab it, kill the people there, and do what we will with it. That's what happened. Whether there were parents there or not. In fact, I could probably assume that in some cases, and many maybe, there weren't like fully functioning parental households. There is data that suggests obviously the success of a person if they have that, but the food chain, as we're calling it, right? The idea of privilege versus oppression, that power play, it starts with patriarchy and it starts with whiteness. And those are the two things that we have to be able to take and go, let's debase this. This is no longer the foundation. It can still be a part of what is then created. And when I say a part, I don't mean whiteness and or patriarchy. I mean community. We can still have white community and white family. That's something that's very important to the way that we see the world. And our worldview is something holistic. It's something that encompasses all people. My mother is really light too. Dominicans are very mixed. So I can feel that. I can feel the ideas that, war within me, that I have whiteness in my history as well as I have blackness. And eventually that'll be the whole world, that we have whiteness and that we have blackness. But we have to start with looking at privilege versus oppression. The fact that you lived, for example, in a community that was 10% Caucasian, that would really mean something if you didn't see any representation of yourself on television. Like if you were forced to sit down and literally only watch black entertainment television, like that's a network, BET. If you were forced to watch only BET and be in a 10%, white community, I'd go, interesting. But that's not what happens. If you're watching television or going to the movies or going to the store or whatever it is, even being in that community, the power play was still happening and encouraging something, right? It was saying, these are the men in power. These are the superheroes that you need to look up to. And I bet your bottom dollar that all of them were white and male. I bet.
Yeah, every president was still white by that point, right?
Yeah.
Without a doubt, I've still got, media encourage whiteness. And I mentioned even before, I said, 10 years ago, I never would have seen a commercial break that didn't have a white person in it.
Right.
Like, I never would have seen that happen, So, I can't, say that growing up in a 10% white town is the same as growing up as, in a 10% black town or whatever, that those experiences.
Or just growing up black. It's not the same.
Just growing up black. I'm not intending to say that those experiences are equivalent at all. Just rather that I have had a different experience than the average white person. And in fact, I think what is the average experience of a white person or a black person? Or
that is the question, man. Person, right? That is what SABORRRR is, man. And I love that you have that question.
Yeah, there's so much diversity based on so many things that intersectionalism doesn't even approach. What side of the tracks that you're born on in a small town, whether you're born in a small town or a large city, what kind of job your dad does, what's his education level, what are his hobbies, does he like to talk to you about dinner, is he even there for dinner, does he smoke, does he not, all of these different things influence and make up who we are and the stories that make up our own lives, right? And it's again, I have to agree, yes, when you look at demographical data, you can't ignore and be like, oh yeah, being white is helpful. Of course it is. I ain't saying it's not, right? But at the same time, say when you take the step further and you go oh, you succeeded because you're white, well, now you're denying someone of any of their history or their agency or their success. And I feel like that's rather unproductive. It's possible for both statements, I guess, to be true, that it is easier for white people. I'm white. Yes, it is easier for me, hands down, right? I feel like it's possible for that to be true. And it's also possible for me to be like, all right, well, any success I have isn't because I'm white, but I can acknowledge that certain things were easier because I was white. Right?
Yeah.
Both of those statements can still be true. They don't have to be mutually exclusive. And when we start to acknowledge the nuances between them, then at the same time, I find it's easier to imagine walking in someone else's shoes and go well, wait a second, hold on. I had that happen because I was white. What if I wasn't white there? What if I think about that? And then the inverse as well. And when we all start walking through each other's shoes, or at least imagine walking through each other's shoes, and why I'm liking what you're doing, when you're able to see a story portrayed for you so that you can maybe visualize it that way, walking through someone's shoes, real or imagined, we build those bonds, the relations, the empathy of going, that is a fellow human being, and nobody, nothing's equal in life, I don't think anybody can, if you think that life is equal, you're deluding yourself, right? We were not all dealt equal hands. And I don't think it's okay to just continue accepting things the way that they are. No, we should absolutely strive to make things better. But at the same time, let's not delude ourselves and think oh, well, your hand was dealt better, so therefore you don't deserve any, success you have or whatever. That kind of bitterness, I can't get behind it. So I don't know if I'm not saying that you're expressing that bitterness, man. Don't worry. I want to make sure that we don't go down that path, if that makes sense.
And to interject,
Ron, Yeah, Rob, I saw you raising your hand, man. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. John Marco, you go first.
Yeah, and to interject real quick, sometimes I like to flip the premise of the conversation itself to make it better understandable. Like, we're talking about a lot how you guys want to use the medium of film to show a more representative America because Western Hollywood media has only shown the success or like the acceptance of a white male, for example, like in general perspective. But on the flip side, that doesn't show that any grievances or hardships a white American male could be going through. I think it's very important that if we're going to have these conversations about, accepting the general population, like understanding each other's backgrounds, we have to be able to look at these. And of course, I did see you acknowledge that, it isn't to say that income levels or having a mother or father in household isn't important. You acknowledge that it is, of course, but to not take those into consideration when having the bigger conversation is, I would say, almost like just a disservice as white Western Hollywood not having more like diversity in their films.
Mm-hmm. No, to piggyback off of that, I 100% agree with that. Like, we have to also acknowledge, that other side too. We can't just assume that, for example, every single white male is just bound to be successful just because of his race. Now, the thing is, we're seeing this movement happening a lot because for the longest time, it hasn't been that way. For the longest time, for as far as we can remember, it hasn't been that way. And John Franco talked about that, with the history part. And so that's why we're seeing people who are oppressed who are starting to speak out, and we're speaking out loud. And that freaks people out to a point where some people say, that's not how you protest. That is not how you talk. If you want to talk to me, meet me at my level. But how can you? How do you want me to meet you at your level? But you put me down for so many years, unconsciously, even if you didn't want to. So when we are angry, and when we're struggling, and we have no food to eat, this is something that Tupac said. He says, at the beginning, we're gonna be nice. We're gonna say, hey man, open the door. I just want some food to eat. After a few weeks not having food, we'll be, hey man, I need to get some food. I am hungry. By week 3, they're like, all right, open the fucking door. I'm gonna fucking break into your shit. I'm gonna steal your fucking food. It is a mindset of scarcity, which is something that from the Yang Gang and from Andrew Yang talks a lot about. A lot of us who have been oppressed have that mindset of scarcity, and it's not our fault. Those were the cards that we were given with. That's why for the longest time, I had to untrain my mind to be like, oh, wait, I am an American, because for the longest time, I never felt like I was. I never felt proud to be American, ever, until recently, last year. That was really it. I'm like, why did it take me 25 years for me to actually recognize myself as a proud American? There's people who've been that way from the get-go. I never experienced that. So there is, if we don't want to generalize, if we don't want to have averages and only talk about the numbers, then great. I agree with that. Then maybe the mainstream media shouldn't do the same thing either. And who is the mainstream media controlled by? Just saying. I don't want to put blames on anybody. I'm just saying that like this current system is what it is. So in order for us to move forward, there has to be some type of listening and there has to be some type of giving on both sides. But the one in terms of the oppressing, the ones who have been the oppressors or who have more privilege, it's important for those who recognize that they have privilege. Even as what Bryson said, even you could be white passing, you're recognizing that you have some type of privilege. So it's how you can use that privilege to be, okay, yes, I realize that I may not be fully, like super successful based on my background or the color of my skin, but I know I have a little bit of an edge, even if it's slightly. So I'm going to do my part. I'm going to change the narrative of what it even means to be a white person or what it means to be an Asian person or a black person. I will engage in this conversation. I'm going to sit in this conversation even if it's uncomfortable. And that is good action versus somebody who's just like, oh, okay, yeah, these people are oppressed. I'm going to go back to my book club. Like nothing happened. that is the difference. So that is something that I kind of want to point out. It's like where's the action coming from and the intention. So yes. Yeah.
You got us all speechless, man.
I guess I don't even know what I'm talking about anymore.
No,
You do have a physical mic to drop if you want.
yeah.
With this microphone.
Just hit it.
Hit. Yeah.
Just the opposite. Let's bring it back into SABORRRR before wrapping up. All right, so your campaign is already funded. You've now got stretch goals. You're hoping to get some like names we might recognize. Don't tell me. Don't worry. I ain't gonna ask you to break that. But like this is some exciting stuff. The campaign is going live still for how long? How much time is remaining?
22 days, I believe, right?
Okay.
Yeah, we have till April 9th.
Okay, cool. So yeah, 20 something, 22 days, something like that.
To go.
All right. Cool. Once it's done with, how long until we're able to see it, do you think? Don't worry, I'm not holding you to this. But what's the timeline look like?
Yeah, no, great question. I mean, I don't want to like over incentivize here, but there definitely, if you're a backer, you will see our first theatrical cut before anybody live in a situation like this, and we talk about it. So anybody that's listening, be, like I said before, a part of the movement. I mean, this is all of these topics that we've kind of covered are things that we bring into. So, for essentially, what I'm saying is, immediately once we're done and we have a first theatrical cut, that'll be shown to all of our backers. If you're not backers, it might be a while. It might be a very long time because we will be doing a festival run, and that festival run will last its course. We don't know how long that'll be. It might be 1 year. It might be 2 years. So, in the film world, that's kind of the way that, we make our connections and we continue to move forward, and we share our art. So, keep an eye for it on any festivals near you. And if you don't see it, then, see it. Be a backer. Be a backer and see it first before anybody else. That's what I say, because there might not be a chance to see it otherwise. But if this is like taken with as much enthusiasm as we've gotten in the funding portion of this, which is again, people funding people, we might see a feature film version of this in the not too far future. When that is, I do not know, but we are hoping for that.
What's the length of SABORRRR as it's currently written?
It's a short, so I mean it's somewhere between 15 and 20 minutes.
Okay.
To get closer to that time.
Sure. That could well be worth the price of a movie ticket, right? So good.
I sure hope so.
Yeah.
I sure hope so. You get to watch other cool things too at like film festivals. So you get one ticket, you get a ticket for like 6 short films.
Yeah, film festivals are cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. All in all, I'm a creative myself, so I love seeing it when anybody's chasing their passion and just making stuff. I think that the world is a better place when people make things. So this is all awesome in my opinion. Bryson, do you have any words that you'd like to share before we head out?
I guess just closing thought is, I mean, art has the power to influence and change perspectives, and I think that's us as artists, as creatives. I mean, that's what we're trying to do. Is like we're trying to help people see others in a different light, through a different perspective, through a different lens. And I hope that with this project and all the other projects that that we work on, or I work on, or we all, as a people work on, that our art can reflect our experiences. Our art can touch and can connect people, and that our art can make positive change and help us as human beings love each other and see each other and embrace each other. And so I hope that, that we can do that, and that our art can help foster that world environment.
Bryson, you're a beautiful person. You stay beautiful, man. To both of you, Gianfranco and Bryson, and of course my friends Gianmarco and Rob, man. Thank you all for being here this week. It has been great to have you all, and to both my guests. I've been honored to have you on the show. So
Hey, thanks for having us. We appreciated it as well, man.
I appreciate the conversation. Thank you
I
very much.
I am looking forward to seeing where SABORRRR goes and what it is as soon as I can. So with that,
see those wreaths. I'm gonna see see those laurels on that film. I will see it.
That's right.
Amazing.
All right. With that, I'm good to call it good, everybody.
That was
All
good.
right, guys. Hey, again, thank you guys. This was a very passionate discussion.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Let's make that normal.
Yeah, that's not normal. That's every episode, I think. It's generally good times. So
Definitely.
yeah. All right, everybody. Thank you much, everybody that's watching. You all be good to each other, and farewell.
Stay safe.